Professor Thomas Miller's office at the Galactic Research Institute wasn't what most aliens expected. Instead of the sleek, metallic walls common throughout the station, his space looked more like an old Earth library. Wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with real paper books, a sight that made most visitors gasp. Koth stood at the doorway, their four eyes blinking rapidly as they adjusted to the warm lighting. The young alien researcher had never seen so many physical books in one place. A strange smell filled the air, something Professor Miller called leather and old paper. "Come in, come in." Professor Miller waved from behind his large desk. He was one of the few humans working at the Institute, known for his exciting studies about Earth's culture. His gray hair and beard made him look wise, though Koth knew he was quite young by human standards, only 50 Earth years old. Koth moved carefully across the room, their tall, slender form towering over the human professor. "You wanted to see me, Professor." "Yes." Miller's eyes lit up with excitement. He picked up a small device from his desk and pressed a button. A hologram appeared, showing various Earth images. People gathered around campfires, children whispering in dark rooms, and adults sharing stories at what humans called parties. "What do you know about urban legends, Koth?" Miller asked, leaning forward in his chair. Koth's skin shifted to a lighter shade of blue, a sign of confusion in their species. "Urban legends. I'm not familiar with this term, Professor." Miller smiled, standing up to pace around his office. "Exactly. That's what makes this so interesting. Urban legends are stories humans tell each other, modern folklore, if you will. But here's the fascinating part. Despite being clearly false, these stories persist. People share them as if they might be true, even in our age of advanced technology and instant fact-checking." Koth's attention spikes focused forward. Their species' way of showing intense interest. But why would humans share information they know isn't true? "That's what I want you to find out." Miller walked to one of his bookshelves and pulled out a small black notebook. "I'm assigning you a special research project. I want you to study human urban legends, particularly focusing on the 5 most unusual ones you can find." Koth's skin rippled with excitement. "My own research project?" "Yes, but there's more." Miller's voice grew serious. 3 months ago, I received this notebook from a colleague. It belonged to a human researcher named Jessica Thompson. She was investigating some particularly strange urban legends when she disappeared. Koth's 4 eyes widened. "Disappeared?" Miller nodded, handing over the notebook. "Without a trace. Her last entry mentions finding connections between 5 legends that nobody had documented before. The thing is," he paused, looking out his window at the stars, "some of her notes don't make sense. The data she collected, it doesn't follow normal patterns." Koth carefully took the notebook, their long fingers gentle with the paper pages. "What do you mean, Professor?" "That's for you to figure out." Miller sat back down, his face showing what humans called a mysterious smile. "I want you to follow Jessica's trail. Find these 5 legends. Study them. But most importantly, figure out why they're different from other urban legends." Koth felt their skin turning a deep purple with determination. This wasn't just any assignment. This was a chance to understand one of humanity's strangest habits, their love of sharing scary stories that might not be true at all. Or were they really untrue? Something in Professor Miller's voice made Koth wonder if there was more to this project than just studying old stories. "When do I start?" Koth asked. Miller checked his old-fashioned wristwatch, another weird human habit he kept. "Right now. The archives are waiting for you." And Koth. He looked up, his expression serious. "Be careful what you go looking for. Sometimes, the stories humans tell have more truth in them than we'd like to believe." The Institute's archive room hummed with the soft sound of computers. Koth sat at a research station, their 4 eyes fixed on multiple screens showing old human internet pages. Jessica Thompson's notebook lay open beside them, its pages filled with messy human handwriting. "Search complete," the computer announced. "Found. Videolog _ Jessica Thompson _ 2024. Kath's skin flickered with excitement as they opened the file. A human woman appeared on the main screen. She had brown hair tied back in what humans called a ponytail, and wore thick framed glasses. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept much. Log entry 47, Jessica said, looking tired but excited. It's 3 a.m., and I think I've finally found it. The connection between all 5 stories. Everyone thought they were separate urban legends, but they're not. They're like pieces of a bigger picture. Kath leaned closer, their attention spikes fully extended. Jessica looked over her shoulder in the video, as if checking if someone was watching her. The timing is what gave it away, she continued. The midnight library, the windows between, the last radio station, the memory collectors, and the time store. They all started appearing in stories around the same time. Late 1980s, she held up a stack of papers. But here's the weird part. I found older references, much older, like people writing about similar experiences in their diaries from the 1940s, but never sharing them publicly. The video jumped, like parts had been deleted. When Jessica appeared again, she looked even more tired. I'm going to the time store location tomorrow, she said. The twins were last seen there. And I think they might know something about the others. About all of it. She laughed nervously. You know what's funny? I started this research thinking I'd write a cool article about creepy stories. But now, she looked directly at the camera. Now I'm not sure these are just stories anymore. The video ended. Kath sat back, their skin turning a thoughtful shade of green. They picked up Jessica's notebook and turned to the last entry. The handwriting was rushed, almost messy. Time isn't what KKA. We think it is. They've known all along. The librarian, the twins, all of them. They're the same thing, just wearing different faces. I have to know the truth. Store location, 42 Oak Street. If anyone finds this, don't. The rest of the page was blank. Kath quickly checked the Institute's records. Jessica Thompson had disappeared 3 days after making that video. The police found her apartment empty, her computer wiped clean. The only thing missing was her phone and the clothes she had been wearing. Opening a new search window, Kath typed in the first legend. The Midnight Library. Thousands of results appeared, but one caught their attention. A news article from a small town in Maine. Local library raises questions, open 24 hours, but no staff ever seen entering or leaving. Below the headline was a picture of a man named Robert Anderson, labeled as the head librarian. He had a kind face and a gentle smile. The article was dated 1987, but when Kath looked closer at the man's face, something felt wrong. They pulled up Jessica's video again and froze it on a frame where she held up some papers. In the corner was an old photograph, barely visible. Kath's skin turned pale blue with shock. The photograph showed the same man, Robert Anderson, but it was from 1943. He hadn't aged a day. Their hand shaking slightly, Kath pressed the button to call Professor Miller's office. This was no longer just research about scary stories. Something much stranger was happening, and Jessica Thompson had found it first. But where was she now? And more importantly, what had she discovered that made her disappear? The small town of Mill Haven, Maine, looked exactly like it did in the old photographs. Kath's human disguise, a tall, slim man in a dark coat, drew curious looks from locals as they walked down Main Street. Professor Miller had insisted on this field trip, saying some things couldn't be learned from archive records alone. The library sat at the end of the street, an old brick building with tall windows and heavy wooden doors. A sign on the front read, "Open 24 hours." It was 11:45 p.m., and the streets were empty except for Kath. Inside, the library smelled like old books and dust, similar to Professor Miller's office, but different somehow. Older. The front desk was empty, but a small bell sat on its surface. Koth's human hand shook slightly as they reached for it. Before they could wring it, a voice spoke from behind them. "Can I help you?" Koth turned quickly. A man stood there, the same man from the photographs. Robert Anderson hadn't aged a day since 1943. Up close, there was something odd about his eyes. They seemed too deep, like wells that went on forever. "I'm researching urban legends," Koth said, using their practiced human voice, particularly ones about this library. Anderson's smile didn't change, but the air in the room felt colder. "Ah, like Jessica Thompson." Koth's heart, or what passed for one in their species, beat faster. "You knew her?" "She came here last year." Asked many questions. Anderson walked behind the desk, his movements too smooth to be natural. "She was particularly interested in our lending policy." "What's special about your lending policy?" Koth asked, though they had a feeling they already knew. Anderson reached under the desk and pulled out an old leather-bound book. Its cover had no title. "We don't lend books here," he said softly. "We lend time." He opened the book, revealing blank pages. Everyone wants more time. A few more hours to finish a project. A few more days with a loved one. A few more years to achieve their dreams. His smile widened slightly. "We can lend them that time. But like all libraries, we have due dates. And if someone doesn't return their borrowed time..." Anderson closed the book. "Then we collect. It's only fair. Some people try to run, of course." Jessica thought she could outsmart the system. Find all the places where time bends. He looked directly at Koth, and for a moment, his eyes showed the truth. Endless corridors of time, stretching in all directions. She didn't understand that we're all connected. The library, the windows, the radio station, all of it. We're just different doors to the same place. Koth's disguise flickered for a split second. Anderson noticed. "Ah," he said, "not human at all. How interesting." He put the book back under the desk. "Tell me, researcher, what do your people know about time?" "We think it moves in one direction," Koth said carefully. "Forward." Anderson laughed. It sounded like pages rustling. "Humans are different. They suspect the truth. They write stories about it, call them urban legends, pretend they're not real. But deep down..." He tapped the desk with one finger, and Koth saw the wood ripple like water. "Deep down, they know time is more like a library. Every possibility exists somewhere on these shelves. The trick is finding the right book." The clock on the wall struck midnight. Anderson glanced at it. "Your time is up for today. But feel free to come back tomorrow. We're always open." His smile turned knowing. "Just remember, everything borrowed must be returned. Even knowledge." Koth left quickly, their human disguise barely holding. Outside, they looked back at the library. Through the windows, they could see Anderson shelving books, but he was doing it backward. The books floated up from his hands to the shelves, and the dust was returning to their covers. Time, Koth realized, didn't work normally in there. And this was just the first legend of 5. Koth's hand shook as they parked their rental car on Maple Drive. The suburban street looked normal in the afternoon sun. Neat houses with well-kept lawns, children riding bikes, and parents working in their gardens. But somewhere on this street, Emily Parker had vanished after leaving a strange note about finding the right version. The Parker house stood at number 42. It looked empty, with a "for sale" sign in the front yard. Koth checked their human disguise in the car mirror before walking up to the house next door, where Mrs. Baker lived. Jessica's notes said this old woman had been Emily's neighbor for 20 years. Mrs. Baker was a small woman with white hair and kind eyes. She invited Koth in for tea, happy to have company. "Oh, you're writing about Emily," she said, pouring tea into flowered cups. "Such a sweet girl, a teacher at the local high school." Everyone was shocked when she disappeared. "Can you tell me about the windows?" Koth asked carefully. Mrs. Baker's hands trembled slightly as she set down her cup. She started talking about them 3 months before she left. said her bedroom window showed different versions of our street at night. The old woman looked out her own window. At first we thought she was just tired from working too much. But then what? One night, she called me over. It was about 3 a.m. She said she had to show me something. Mrs. Baker's voice grew quiet. Her bedroom window, it wasn't showing our street. The houses were different. The trees were taller. And the cars, they looked strange, like something from the future. Kath leaned forward. Did you see anything else? There was a version where the street was empty, just wild grass and trees. And another where, she shivered. Everything was made of metal and glass, like a city from a science fiction movie. Emily said every night showed different versions. She started taking notes, trying to understand the pattern. Mrs. Baker got up and went to a drawer. She pulled out an envelope. She gave me this the day before she disappeared. Said if anything happened to her, I should give it to someone who asked the right questions. She handed it to Kath. I think you're that someone. Inside the envelope was a series of drawings. Each showed the same street, but different. One had flying cars. Another showed horse-drawn carriages. A third showed what looked like alien buildings. At the bottom of each drawing was a string of numbers. Their dates, Kath realized, but not just from the past or future. These are different presents, different versions of now. The night Emily disappeared, I heard her calling out. Mrs. Baker said, when I looked out my window, I saw her standing in her bedroom. She was waving at something. Then she stepped forward, right through her window, and vanished. The old woman wiped away a tear. The police said she must have run away, but they never found her. Kath walked to the window and looked at their reflection. For a moment, just a moment, they thought they saw their true alien form in the glass instead of their human disguise. But behind that reflection was another street, one where the houses were built from crystal, and the sky held 3 moons. They blinked, and the view returned to normal. Mrs. Baker, Kath said slowly, did Emily ever mention meeting anyone else who could see these different versions? Maybe someone who worked at a library, or 2 twins who run a store. The old woman's eyes widened. Yes, she did. She said she met a librarian who told her the windows were like books, showing different stories of what could be. And she mentioned 2 brothers who sold her something. How did you know about them? Kath carefully folded the drawings and put them in their pocket. Because they're all connected. The windows aren't just showing other versions of reality. They're showing ways to reach them. As they left Mrs. Baker's house, Kath looked back at Emily's old bedroom window. For a split second, they saw a face there. Emily's face, smiling and waving from what looked like a future world. Then she was gone, leaving Kath to wonder if she had really run away, or if she had simply found a better version of her world and stepped into it. The clock on Kath's rental car dashboard showed 3:15 a.m. They drove down an empty highway in Nevada, miles from the nearest town. Their radio scanned through static-filled channels automatically. Jessica's notes said the mysterious station only appeared on empty highways after 3 a.m., when the distances between places felt longer than they should. Static, static, static. Then, you're listening to The Night Drive with Michael Wilson. It's always 3 a.m. here, and we're taking your calls. Kath's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The voice sounded warm and friendly, like an old-time radio host. But something about it made their skin ripple under their human disguise. Our first caller tonight is Mary from 1954. Go ahead, Mary. A woman's voice crackled through the speakers. She sounded worried. Hello? Mr. Wilson. The war just ended, and my Johnny should be home. But he's not. The Army says they can't find him. Don't worry, Mary, Michael Wilson said softly. Johnny's train got delayed. He'll be home tomorrow morning at 9:47. He's bringing you a music box from Paris. The woman started crying with joy. Thank you, thank you. Next caller, Tom from 2087. Kath nearly drove off the road. A deep voice with a strange accent spoke next. "Wilson, the colony ships are ready. But I'm scared. What if we don't find a new home out there?" "The third planet around Proxima Centauri," Wilson said. "Look for the northern continent. You'll know it when you see it." Koth pulled over to the side of the road. The radio kept playing. More callers came through. Voices from the past, present, and future, all asking Michael Wilson for help. And he always knew the answers. Then, next caller, Jessica Thompson from 2024. Koth's 4 eyes widened beneath their human disguise. "Mr. Wilson," Jessica's voice was shaking. "I found them. The library, the windows, your station, the photographs, the store. They're all connected. But someone's following me now. What should I do?" There was a long pause. For the first time, Michael Wilson sounded worried. "Jessica, listen carefully. Go to the time store. Ask for the blue key. The twins will know what it means. But hurry. They're almost there." "Who's almost there?" "The ones who want to keep the secret. The ones who think humans aren't ready to know about." The radio crackled with static. Koth quickly wrote down everything they'd heard. When the signal came back, it was a different conversation. "Our next guest is Koth, listening right now from Highway 50 in Nevada." Koth froze. "I know you're researching the legends," Michael Wilson said. "You're getting close to the truth. But be careful. You're not the only one watching humanity. Others are watching too. They don't want humans to know how special they are." "Special," Koth whispered. "Most species discover time travel through science. But humans, they found the cracks in reality by accident. They wrote stories about them. Your people think humans are just beginning to understand time. The truth is, they'd been playing with it for centuries. They just don't know it yet." The radio went silent. Then music started playing. An old song that hadn't been popular for 50 years. But mixed in with the music, Koth could hear other songs. Future songs. Songs that hadn't been written yet. They started the car and turned around. The time store was next on their list. But now they had new questions. Who else was watching humanity? And why did they want to keep humans from knowing the truth about their own power? As they drove away, the radio played one last message. "This is Michael Wilson, broadcasting from everywhere. Stay tuned, listeners. The truth is out there, scattered across time like breadcrumbs. You just have to know where and when to look." The old photography studio sat between a coffee shop and a bookstore in downtown Portland. A faded sign above the door read Hayes Photography, Memories That Last Forever. Koth stood outside, looking at the dusty windows. According to the records, William Hayes had disappeared in 1987, but his studio had never been sold or rented to anyone else. The door was unlocked. Inside, the studio looked frozen in time. Cameras from different eras sat on shelves. Everything from old box cameras to modern digital ones. But something was strange about them. Each camera had extra parts, little gears and dials that shouldn't be there. Koth walked to the back wall, where hundreds of blank photographs hung. They looked white at first glance, but when Koth moved closer, they could see faint images shifting just below the surface, like dreams trying to wake up. A bell rang as someone entered the studio. Koth turned to see an old woman standing there. "I'm Betty Miller," she said. "I was one of William's last customers. I saw you asking questions around town about him." She walked to one of the blank photos and touched it gently. "Would you like to know what really happened here?" Koth nodded. "I came to get my wedding photos taken," Betty said. "But William, he didn't take normal pictures. He said his cameras could capture memories, not just how things looked, but how they felt, how they smelled, the whole experience." She smiled sadly. "I didn't believe him until he showed me my test photo." "What did you see?" Koth asked. "My whole wedding day. Not just pictures. I could step into the memory, feel my dress, smell the flowers, hear the music. It was like being there again." Betty wiped away a tear. But then William started acting strange. Said he found memories in his photos that nobody had given him. Memories from different times, different places. She pointed to the blank photos on the wall. These aren't empty. They're full of memories, but not from our time. William said he accidentally created cameras that could capture memories from other timelines, other versions of reality. The last time I saw him, he was excited about something he'd found in one of them. Kath took out Jessica's notebook. Did he mention anything about a library, or a radio station, or windows that showed different worlds? Betty's eyes widened. Yes, he said he'd found proof that time wasn't what we thought it was. He'd captured memories of people using these tiers in reality. Said humans had been slipping through cracks in time for centuries. We just didn't realize it. She reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. Unlike the others, this one showed a clear image. William Hayes standing in his studio, but behind him, visible in a mirror, was a different studio, one filled with strange equipment that looked far too advanced for 1987. The day he disappeared, Betty said, he told me he'd found the biggest memory of all. The truth about humanity's future. He said we weren't just stumbling through time by accident anymore. In the future, we'd learn to control it, master it. She handed Kath the photo. Then he walked into one of his blank photographs and vanished. Kath studied the photo carefully. In the corner, barely visible, they could see two familiar faces, the twins from the Time store, watching William from the doorway. Did he ever mention meeting two brothers? Kath asked. Or a librarian named Robert Anderson? Yes, Betty whispered. He said they were like him, collectors. But while he collected memories, the librarian collected time. And the twins. She looked around nervously. The twins collected people who got too close to the truth. Kath's human disguise flickered slightly. They were getting closer to understanding, but each answer only led to more questions. Why were these collectors allowing humans to find these tiers in reality? And more importantly, what was waiting in the Time store that had made Jessica disappear? The small convenience store sat on the corner of Oak and Pine Streets, exactly where Jessica's last note said it would be. A neon open sign buzzed in the window, even though it was midnight. The store's name was simply HFY Time Market, in faded letters. Kath checked their human disguise one last time before pushing open the door. A bell chimed, but the sound seemed to echo longer than it should, as if it was ringing in several times at once. Inside, the store looked normal at first. Shelves held snacks, drinks, and basic supplies. But when Kath looked closer, they noticed something odd. Some items had packaging designs from the 1950s. Others had labels written in languages that didn't exist yet, and a few looked like they came from other worlds entirely. "Can we help you?" Two identical men stood behind the counter, David and Daniel Cooper. They wore matching red vests and friendly smiles, but their eyes were like the librarian's, too deep, too knowing. "I'm looking for Jessica Thompson," Kath said. "And the blue key." The twins' smiles didn't change, but the air in the store grew colder. "Ah," said one. Kath couldn't tell which was David and which was Daniel. Another researcher. "You've been busy," said the other twin. "The library, the windows, the radio station, the photo studio. And now here," the first twin finished, following Jessica's trail. Kath took out the photograph of William Hayes. "You were there when he disappeared, just like you were there for all the others. Why?" The twins looked at each other. Then one reached under the counter and pulled out a small blue key. It looked ordinary, except it seemed to buzz with energy. "Humans are special," the first twin said. "They see things differently," said the second. "Most species discover time travel through science. But humans, they dream it first. They tell stories about it. They imagine all the possibilities. And sometimes, they said together, their imagination is so strong it cracks reality." Kath looked at the key. What happened to Jessica? "She found the truth," one twin said. About humanity's future. About what they become, said the other. Would you like to see? Before Koth could answer, the store's back door swung open. Through it, they could see a vast room filled with swirling lights and floating doorways, portals to other times, other places, other realities. We're not just collectors, the first twin explained. We're guardians, said the second, keeping these doors safe until humanity is ready. Jessica wanted to tell everyone too soon, so we gave her a choice. Koth understood. You sent her to the future. The twins nodded. To see what humanity becomes when they master time itself, when they learn to bend reality, when they become more powerful than any species in the galaxy. They held out the blue key. Would you like to see too? Or would you rather write your report about some harmless urban legends? Koth looked at the key, then at the swirling portals beyond the door. Through one of them, they thought they saw Jessica Thompson, but she looked different. Older, wiser, wearing clothes made of light and time. The choice was clear. Some truths were too big for a simple research paper. Koth reached for the key. Professor Miller sat in his office, reading Koth's final report. The paper was short, just one page. It said simply, Conclusion. Human urban legends about time travel are just stories. No evidence found of actual temporal manipulation. Research complete. Miller smiled and put the report in his desk drawer, next to similar reports from other researchers over the years. Then he walked to his window and looked out at the Galactic Research Institute's grounds. But he wasn't seeing the present anymore. He saw the past, all the other researchers who had followed this trail, and the future, all those who would follow it later. They all made the same choice Koth had made. Some truths had to stay hidden, at least for now. His computer beeped. A new message appeared. FROM. Koth. Location. Earth. Year 2157. NESSAG. Professor, you knew all along, didn't you? About the collectors, the time tiers, everything. That's why you gave me Jessica's notebook. I'm with her now, watching humanity take its first official steps into time itself. It's beautiful. They're building ships that can sail through time like boats on an ocean. The twins were right. Humans dreamed it first, then made it real. When are you coming to see? Miller typed back a simple reply. Soon. Keep watching. Keep protecting. The stories aren't just stories. They're practice. Humanity is learning to dream bigger dreams. He sent the message, then looked at his old-fashioned wristwatch. It wasn't really a watch. It was much more. The hands didn't just tell time. They could move time. Robert Anderson had given it to him long ago, back when Miller wasn't really Miller, but another collector watching humanity's progress. On his bookshelf, a photo album held pictures taken by William Hayes, memories of humanity's journey toward their destiny. Next to it sat an old radio that sometimes picked up Michael Wilson's broadcasts from everywhere. And in his window, if he looked just right, he could see all the other possible Earths, spinning in their own versions of space and time. The collectors had chosen well. Humans were the first species they'd found who could handle the truth about time. Not because humans were the strongest or smartest, but because they were the best at imagining. They turned their dreams into stories, their stories into legends, and their legends into reality. Miller checked his watch again. Somewhere in Maine, a library was opening its doors, lending time to those who needed it. In a quiet suburb, a young girl was looking through her window at another world. On a dark highway, a truck driver was tuning his radio to a station that shouldn't exist. In a dusty photo studio, blank photographs were filling up with memories that hadn't happened yet. And in a small store that moved from city to city, two twins were helping another dreamer find their way to tomorrow. These weren't just urban legends. They were humanity's first steps toward mastering time itself. Each story was a crack in reality, a practice run for the future that was coming. The collectors, Miller, Anderson, Wilson, Hayes, and the twins, they were just guardians, keeping these cracks safe until humanity was ready to step through them all at once. Miller opened his desk drawer again and pulled out a small blue key. Soon, it would be time to open all the doors. Soon, humanity would wake up and realize they had been practicing time travel all along, in their stories and dreams and legends. But for now, let them think these were just creepy stories shared in the dark. Let them practice their power in secret, thinking they were just telling tales. The time would come when they would understand the truth. After all, as every collector knew, timing was everything.